right, welcome everybody. This is the May 2020 monthly market update. You guys can access a lot of the past monthly updates
Welcome everybody. This
at simplepassivecashflow.com/investor letter. But we'll get going here. Obviously, a lot of this month will be surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic and news affecting our real estate investments from there. If you guys haven't heard about me, my name is Lane Kawoka, professional engineer or ex-engineer. Still have the PE. I have a podcast called Simple Passive Cash Flow, found on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and also have a pretty robust YouTube channel. And if you would like to join our tribe, we have a free Facebook group for to get to know folks in our group a little bit better. So I'm going to run through, there's quite a bit of articles this month. If you guys know my style, I run through it pretty quickly, but here we go. So shopping center business reports that Gap, Macy's, Kohl's, and to furlough most employees as stores remain closed during COVID-19 pandemic. RE Business Online reports that Under Armour to furlough 6,600 workers beginning April 12th. And I'm going to go a little bit chronologically here to kind of recap the month of April. So I put it this way because hopefully it puts things a little bit more context for everybody to see how kind of the story unfolded. Of course, March was the first month that COVID-19 kind of took effect. In my opinion, that second, third week of March is when things emotionally turned towards, kind of the fear base. And what we're going to kind of see is how the story kind of unfolded here with a lot of big businesses furloughing and people having to stay at home. Commercial property executive reported at the beginning of April that U.S. braces for more job losses. Economies expect this week's unemployment claim number to jump well beyond the record 3.3 million filed last week. And then later on, they reported unemployment claims topped 6.6 million. And I do believe later on the month, these numbers and estimates increased. So, with people unable to go out, a lot of restaurants and other industries just not able to make money, unemployment skyrocketed. Also in the beginning of the month, April 3rd, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway sells part of their Delta Southwest Airlines stakes. Sold about 18% of his Delta Airlines and 4% of their Southwest Airlines. So this is right after, I would say, a lot of the big fallout, the initial fallout of the stock market happened. And a lot of this is, kind of obviously this stuff happened. GDP fell at 4.8% annual rate, the first quarterly drop since 2014, worst drop since 2008. Consumer spending plunged 7.6%, the most since 1980. It accounts for 70% of the GDP. Services dropped the most on record, driven mostly by one industry, healthcare. Pandemic required providers to pull back on most profit drivers like electronic procedures and routine visits. I know in our Hui investor group, like a lot of the dentists really got hurt bad, and a lot of the non-emergency doctors couldn't take in and do their procedures. So it's really unusual how this pandemic impacted some people very greatly, and others, they were relatively unimpacted. Next quarter, economists are projecting at least a 30% annual decline. RE Business Online reports that U.S. economy loses 700,000 jobs in March due to efforts to contain spread of coronavirus. And you can see, if you guys are tuning in on the YouTube channel when we do this live, you can see sort of the the comparison on a graph of how the monthly change in job gains. Normally we're hovering around 100 to 200 jobs have created, 200,000, 100 to 200,000 jobs created July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February. Then in March, a negative 700,000 occurred. Week in review. Now, I have a couple of these reports in here. This came out in the beginning of the month. So again, kind of showing how things progressed. Some of the, you guys can read it on the screen here, those of you guys who are on the YouTube, but I will read some of the highlights here. So they're commenting and appearing to be past the peak of infections, but the US GDP is expected to contract severely in Q2 before giving up to stronger growth starting in Q3, supported by government stimulus and pent-up demand. They're kind of calling for a second half of the year recovery. Certainly going into 2021, things are looking strong from this and a variety of other sources. And this is reported by CBRE. Some of the other highlights here: Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and Atlanta are hopeful markets to watch as their economies begin to reopen in phases. And these are a lot of the early adopters of those trying to get out there quicker than the others. I do believe, and in Texas, a lot of the restaurants are kind of open at this point. From last I heard, talking to some other partners. Frontline workers get access to 3 million hotel guest rooms. And this is one of those, kind of warm and fuzzy articles where despite the suffering of massive pandemic business loss, the lodging industry is pulling together to provide temporary housing for workers on the front lines. Part of this, has probably got to be some kind of trade in the background with the government and the hotel industry. But it's the right thing to do. I think these are some nice. People aren't staying in hotels, right? Hotels are hurting really bad. And we'll kind of get into some of the data that supports that here in a little bit later. The question that's on everybody's mind, and honestly what made me a little anxious this month and last month, is are people going to pay their rent? Wall Street Journal tried to scare everybody by releasing this article that headlined nearly a third of US apartment renters didn't pay April rent. And I don't know where the heck they're getting their data from, but this was entirely not true from my point of view. And hey, maybe they're just taking their survey from a lot of more primary markets like California, where people got it in their head that they don't need to pay rent this month. I don't know where the heck they'd get that. Maybe it's from Instagram. But this is an example of fake news, in my opinion. I mean, Wall Street Journal, but it depends how they sampled their data. I like to use these more industry publications. Multi-Housing News reported that the majority of residents paid April rent. Reported that nearly 70% of rental households across the nation paid their rent this month, and then that was the first week of April, and then they reported later on the month that rent payments hit 89%. And this is pretty typical what we saw across our portfolio. Anywhere from normally collections are in the 95% range. You're gonna have people not pay, period, any month. But the impact that coronavirus and the pandemic had to that number was, we saw in the month of April, and a little bit before that was maybe a few point decrease from there. And that's what is kind of shown across the Multi-Housing News. Another source commented that the rent payment rate at 93% of prior month. So I think this is to be expected. This is what I personally expected across my portfolio. There was some slight decline in collections, but it wasn't a big deal. And those who were, going through some trouble, we were able to make individual plans with, and they eventually caught up later at the end of the month. Thus far, it is the first week of May. This is not good data, but thus far, it looks like collections are tracking maybe a little bit less than what it was in May, but still overall, I'm pretty relieved from what I'm seeing. We're gonna kind of dig into some of the individual asset classes and see how they're faring. But Multi-Housing News has an article: Will student housing be impacted? And heck yeah, it is. A lot of kids had to get pulled out of colleges, couldn't finish up the year, and a lot of parents. Here's the deal: a lot of parents are the ones who make the financial decisions, and a lot of parents are a little apprehensive. Is their kid going to go back to? Is their kid's school going to open in time? So, a quote that I pulled from here is, it was commented, I think the reality is in a fairly likely scenario that some of the pre-leasing will be backloaded until parents and students feel comfortable with the university's fall semester will open. So it's a wait and see. And this is why in my buy box, I don't really focus on student housing because they're impacted by times like these. Office leasing. Now, Commercial Property Executive had an article, and they quote, tenants and landlords are all trying to work together on understanding the respective needs for one another. I'd even go as far as say lenders are doing the same thing. Everybody is trying to play nicely in that sandbox. And we can all understand that right now people are not going into the office. They are told to work from home for the most part. And that this is dropping the demand for housing or for office space. And maybe it might lead to a longer term trend that people don't need to go into the office. We didn't need all these stinking meetings to get things done. We're good with working virtually. I know I am. Short-term rentals. I think these are the ones getting killed the most. There was a great article. You guys can check out citylab.com, but it was entitled, Can Airbnb Survive Coronavirus? AirDNA, which is a great source for data for you guys who do short-term lease rentals, they said that there was a dropping 80% compared to the previous week in the beginning of March. Bookings in New York City, San Francisco, and Seattle had dropped more than 50% compared to the week beginning January, and drops over 35% in Washington, D.C. and Chicago. Again, this is another reason why I don't invest in short-term rentals. And you guys, there's an article I wrote about the cons of short-term rentals at simplepassivecashflow.com/STL for short-term rental, or STR, /STR is that URL. Another image of some of the Airbnbs from AirDNA showing on a graph how much of a decline from the beginning of March to the end of April in terms of bookings contracted. I think a lot of here in Hawaii, and I'm sure this is across the nation, there was a lot of government regulation over, they wanted to shut down these short-term rentals, and people who had short-term rentals, they were desperate. They needed to pay their mortgage because they weren't getting any type of tenants to come through. So they were being very strategic or tricky on when they would list it, so they would hide it away from the government regulators. Again, which I don't really condone doing that type of stuff. I don't know, stick to a normal investment like workforce housing, something that everybody needs. So here's on a graph that Green Street Advisors put together, where they just put all the asset classes on a graph and kind of show which ones get impacted the most. Some of the more sensitive to a pandemic, short-term rentals, SNFs, which are assisted living developments, senior housing, student housing, um, gaming, lodging. I think these are like a lot of the hospitality. Think Las Vegas, um, and then strip malls and malls are impacted. Some of the things that are on the bottom of the list of little impact are short-term rentals, apartments, industrial, storage. And that leads to the what should you invest? Best value in a downturn might be workforce housing, says Multi Housing News. They came up with this white paper assessing the impact of a recession related to COVID-19 crisis might have on apartment properties. So they came up with this analysis on which they created this category of vulnerable industries, which is comprised of those who work in hospitality and food. So think in restaurants or people like that, and like hotels or casinos, that type of stuff. They took those type of people who were getting hit the hardest, and they tried to figure out where do these people live, right? Like if you are a landlord and you have one of these people working or paying your rent, um, so they realized that 52% of these guys are living in houses. They're renting houses. Another 28% are in single family home, and the 52% was houses that they own themselves. 28% are they're renting single family homes, and just 18% of these guys are in apartments, multifamily rentals. So again, the conclusion of this article was that of vulnerable industries, hospitality and food, only 18% of these guys are in apartments, and therefore the single family home landlord is going to get hit harder. Things to think about, right? Because like you try and bulletproof your portfolio to whatever can happen, and pandemic is just one of those things that we have just added to the list. So CBRE came up with this executive summary in the beginning of April. Some of the highlights here are, all this will lead to increased multifamily vacancy and declining rents over the next 2 months. And they expect the multifamily market to bottom out in Q3 and begin a recovery in 2020 Q4. So they are seeing us kind of popping right out of this. Overall vacancy is expected to rise to 2.7 percentage points to 6.3 in Q3 and fully recover in 2021. The Federal Reserve pledged to keep interest rates near zero until full employment returns and inflation exceeds. So that's something to keep in mind for those of you guys who are always constantly monitoring those rates and wanting to refinance or pull money out. CNBC reports that JP Mortgage chased to raise mortgage borrowing standards as economic outlook darkens. So people are saying, well, like there's going to be a lot of distress inventory after this COVID-19 thing, which I don't really quite buy. I mean, if it gets that distressed, I probably wouldn't buy it. But the problem is with this theory is like what's happening is the lending market is getting more difficult. So if your deal gets better, which I'll argue that may or may not be true, and your lending gets worse, then is it really a better deal? I mean, the lending is part of this whole equation. So from middle of April, customers applying for a new mortgage will need a credit score of at least 700 and will be required to make a down payment equal to 20% of the home value. So that credit score need is coming up. So the change highlights how banks are quickly shifting gears to respond to the darkening U.S. economic outlook. So what does that mean? Well, more apartment renters and people renting because they can't meet the qualifications to buy a house. And I think this also means lower condo prices because there'll be less demand for condos. Because a lot of the guys who are on the bubble with lending are the guys who don't have much money at all. So they're trying to get into condos as opposed to that second or lifetime house, the bigger house. Other developments, and this is more affecting us on our multifamily apartments or bigger commercial deals. People are always asking, how does it impact us? So Fannie and Freddie Mac backed agency debt is now requiring 6 to 18 months of payments in reserve, and this just means that we can kind of borrow less proceeds, which slightly lowers returns, not much, but this is all just kind of moving the needle very slightly. And it depends on the debt service coverage ratio of the deal. But this can have a negative impact on whether a deal works or not. There have been also some changes in forbearance based on some of the agency debt. And ultimately, I think this flows down to the single family home mom and pop landlord. You can see some of the guidances and the policy that the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the big guys will lend out to the bigger operators in syndication deals. Top 15 fastest growing megacities on here. First one is Guangzhou. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Cairo, Jakarta, Indonesia, Tokyo at 33 million, New Delhi. But the point of putting this up, the discussion that was happening in this article is with this whole pandemic thing potentially being a part of our lives in the future, perhaps these mega cities are less of an option. It's going to be, people are going to want more space. They're going to want to move to the suburbs. The United States biggest city, which is New York, has 15 million people, which is only 15th on this list. So that's the question, right? Are these bigger cities, are people going to want to live downtown, or are they going to want to move out to the suburbs and have more space? I think these are some of the macro trends. I mean, if you're an investor and you're buying an individual deal that makes sense, I think it's sort of this doesn't matter to you. I mean, I think this type of data is for the guys who are investing like tens of millions of dollars and they're buying it on an institutional level. But you as a mom and pop investor should always be buying the outlier deal that it doesn't matter if it's deep in the heart of the city or out in a tertiary market. I think the biggest things are you buying at a discount, or the rents undervalued, and his ability to bump rents. So we talked a little bit about which asset classes are hurting the most and which ones are more resilient. This is a slide on which sectors and mainly what markets are to be on the lookout for. As I mentioned earlier, some of the biggest impacted sectors are leisure and hospitality employment. And those ones that some of the top 10 are Las Vegas, Orlando for Mickey Mouse, the Florida coast, Orange County, and then San Antonio, San Diego, Miami, Austin, Charlotte, Los Angeles. So not saying that there will be these are at-risk thing, not to say that there'll be another pandemic in the future, right? Who knows? But this is just another thing to kind of keep on your radar. Add on to your laundry list of other things: tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, locusts, and a pandemic. Which industries did better this past month? Well, grocery stores went up 26%. And the losers were clothing, probably closure of all the malls. And people just aren't, they don't need to impress anybody. You don't need to buy any clothes, I guess. New York Times had a cool article. I like how they have, their interactive graphs. People are spending more money on groceries, less on travel, shopping, and transportation. Who are the winners? Supermarkets, general merchants, and e-commerce. Home improvement saw an increase. I don't know how they became essential stay-at-home, or so they're able to stay open. But I went to Home Depot to buy some seeds to plant in my garden because I was bored, and man, the line was like going outside. And some of the losers were airlines, cruises, fitness. A lot of gyms are hurting. Movie theaters, lodging, and apparel. Alcohol sales were up. Just another way of, movie theaters. Here's some of the losers: movie theaters, events and attractions, toys, entertainment, book retailers, arts and crafts, music, sporting goods were some of the big losers. Some of the winners were gaming and video streaming and music streaming. So a lot of people playing at home, playing video games, passing the time. Again, I bought one of the Echelon bikes that you work out, and there was like a 1 month backlog. And I also bought a better webcam to come to you guys at 4K, and that thing, it's still on back order. Last month, we reported that Cheesecake Factory was going bankrupt. Well, the RE Business Online reports that Ronak Capital invests $200 million to keep them alive. So you guys can continue to have your cake. At least that's the ticker symbol for Cheesecake Factory. RE Business Online also reports that Amelie buys multifamily development site on South Broadway in Denver. Now, for those of you guys who know who Amelie is a developer that focuses on residential Class A. So these are pretty hip places to live. A lot of, like, I would say, like, the yuppies will live in Amelie's. They'll have the movie theater inside as an amenity. Some of them might even have bars. I would call them Class A rentals, more the luxury type. But they'll build in a lot of the big city primary markets and big institutional player. But the way I read this type of article is, like, I'm kind of seeing that Amelie, they're institutional player, they're going to do their research, but maybe when they go on, that's maybe when I think that by the time they actually build the thing, the market has maybe gotten overheated and starting to cool down. So you guys can interpret this type of news however you guys want, but that's just my 2 cents. Commercial CMBS late payments starting to mushroom. So this is another kind of stress test on different asset classes on some of the late payments, delinquencies starting to happen. And below you'll see a lot of these hotel, retail, multifamily, industrial, office, all had sub 3% delinquency, and hotel jumped all the way up to 20%. 1 every 5 hotels are behind on their payments. 1 out of every 10 retail, 10%, are behind on their payments. And multifamily, industrial, and office are all around 5% or less. So they are less impacted by this. So again, this is the data. Hotel and retail are getting killed out there. One of the biggest hot topics that's been happening in our Facebook group is people are complaining that they can't evict people. And so here is a map put together by Marcus and Millichap outlining which states have moratoriums on eviction. Most of them do at this point. Some of the ones, obviously, a lot of the blue states will have this. Some of the states with no programs are Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Georgia, South Dakota. Well, no one lives in South Dakota and North Dakota, so nobody cares about that. um, States that suspended court eviction proceedings, not necessarily had an eviction moratorium, were New Mexico, Wyoming, Idaho, North Dakota, uh, Maine, Vermont, and I don't know what that is. I don't invest there. Um, Near Kentucky and Virginia. So we're gonna get into a little bit of actionable things you guys can do, and I have been keeping a list and a running note sheet of all the COVID-19 CARES Act um, developments at simplepassivecashflow.com/COVID-19, sort of a living guide. Always consult your CPA attorney and do your own due diligence. But here are some of the developments that happened this past month. So you guys should have received your share of the 60 million checks, stimulus checks through direct deposit. May 4th, IRS will start to send paper stimulus checks. And I'm pretty impressed how quickly they actually moved in and actually got the aid out to where it's needed most. One of the biggest perks of the CARES Act is that you're able to take $100,000 out of your retirement funds and what I call jailbreaking it, getting it out of those crappy mutual funds and into real investments. So the CARES Act allows each person, so you can take 100 grand and your spouse can take 100 grand penalty free. Normally there's a 10% early withdrawal penalty, but with under the CARES Act, as long as you're impacted by the COVID-19 thing, which in my opinion, of course, consult your own professional or get a new professional. We are all impacted. So you might be able to take that out and pay the taxes back in 3 years, I think is the what the guidance is saying. If you don't want to withdraw it, maybe you want to, now is the time you've been mulling it over at home, you want to do a rollover. Here's a nice rollover chart, whether going from Roth, traditional, simple IRA, SEP IRA, 457, 403B, or any designed Roth account. A lot of the retirement information is located on my QRP site at simplepassivecashflow.com/QRP, which is short for Qualified Retirement Plan. So here is a map of the United States showing which states small businesses were able to get the payroll protection aid. A lot of, during the first 10 days of the federal government small business rescue program, it was crazy, guys. I mean, the money was just going out, and one of the headlines was that the bigger companies who were asking for more got help first because the lazy banker just wanted to get it out, and it's easier when you just approve the top 5 guys instead of the bottom 50 something guys. Yeah, I guess you don't blame them when the goal is to get the money out. Again, a lot of the more COVID-19 developments. We had a great webinar that we did on April 15th with my CPA. Again, that video is hosted at simplepassivecashflow.com/COVID-19. So if you guys haven't been keeping up, in March, beginning of March, the Fed dropped the funds rate to 0%. And the analogy I like to use is we gave up all our dry powder at that point. And I was actually kind of surprised they dropped it so quickly. Normally they're dropping the rate maybe a quarter point, at most half a point, but they dropped it, I think, like a full point or more, just in a matter of a few weeks. So no more dry powder, which is a little scary. But then they came through later on and signed the CARES Act, which is 2 trillion, or might as well be $1 gazillion, in my opinion. You're gonna have to pay that back, probably with higher taxes in the future. Some of the provisions of the COVID-19 CARES Act enacted on March 27th was a 5-year carryback on net operating losses. And I would consult your CPA on a lot of these things. On one of our deals, we had submitted the K1s back to the CPA to take advantage of some of this stuff. Here are some markets likely to experience a longer post-COVID-19 recovery. Florida, because of the high population of visitors, and 19% of their population is over 65 and older. New York, mostly because of the density, and they might have a lot of people moving out, is what they say, and 63 million tourists per year, so a lot of visitors there. And Illinois, because of, everybody knows, everybody wants out of Illinois. One of the reasons, the high corporate taxes. They have a 45% increase in January 2020, high property taxes. People are just leaving that city, that poor city of Chicago. Source on this is CEL and Associates. Markets likely to exceed a long recovery. Again, more California. They locked down 40 million people for many weeks, is economically devastating. High gas taxes, unfunded pension liabilities, and they ranked number 48 of all U.S. states in overall economic freedom. Well, that's why they call it the Socialist Republic of California. Nevada's another one that's going to see it hard. 56 million tourists, 50 million are in Las Vegas. It's just going to be, those casinos and hotels are going to be hit the hardest. Airline hub cities like Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Denver, Orlando, Washington, D.C., LA, Seattle, Charlotte, Houston, Seattle are among the top airports for passenger traffic. And then oil dependent markets, because, behind this COVID-19, there was just another big headline of all the crude oil dropping prices. A lot of these are like Houston. Real estate sectors likely to experience enhanced building operation regulations, which is typically not good for the mom and pop investor. Sometimes the institutions can actually benefit from this, but these are lodging facilities, apartment communities, retail centers, gaming facilities, healthcare, office buildings, commercial conference facilities, entertainment centers, outdoor assembly venues. I'm sure they're going to tell everybody to wipe surfaces like 5 times a day or do whatnot. It's just going to make business harder in these sectors. Impact on COVID-19 on development. You could see incorporating more hands-free amenities like motion active doors, restroom faucets, tissue dispensers, parking gates, doors, and building designs. More point of sale stuff come out. I mean, like when I would go pick up my food, it would just kind of befuddle me how you still have to like sign the credit card thing and put the credit card in. I guess or like press the screen. I'm like, can't they like just call it good and unless you have to touch a screen? Utilization of new building materials, inclusion of pandemic and force majeure clauses in construction contracts. I know in our syndication documents, I think that word got like thrown in like future versions, which is just added to the laundry list of things that can go wrong. Upgrades to HVAC systems regarding air quality and circulation, and regular on-site health inspections during construction before certificate occupancy is cut. But it's not all doom and gloom. Why real estate will remain a preferred investment class post COVID-19 is still in a low interest rate environment. Americans need a place to live, like apartments. They need a place to shop, like grocery anchored retail, and distribute goods in warehouse and distributed facilities. Continue strong demographics, population is still going up, and favorable tax treatments with all the goodies in there, like the 1031, carried interest, capital gains, opportunity zones, cost segregations, etc. So I've been watching a lot of other informational videos with my time, and one of these is some content done by Richard Duncan, economist. You can see some of his past work and podcasts at simplepassivecashflow.com/Duncan. But I subscribe to his newsletter. It's a paid program, so it's not like some free stuff. But he kind of outlines some demand shocks as inflationary demand shocks that will increase demand and push prices higher. And that's what happens in a war. And the deflationary demand shock that decreases demand and pushes prices lower, like how we're in a coronavirus example like this. So that's how a situation where war, inflationary demand is, and a deflationary demand like how we're in now. And it's just interesting to kind of hear from more academic viewpoint of what's happening here. Some of the supply shocks where decreased supply pushed prices higher was the oil shocks in the 1970s, and other deflationary supply shocks that increase supply and push prices lower, which can be a event like the general globalization. There was a big controversial headline that came out where California was forcing landlords to reduce rents by 25%, even if a tenant cannot demonstrate a hardship or need, allowing judges and the court system to set rents and change the rental agreements already in place. I'm not even going to read the other two bullet points, but you guys are probably getting upset. But hopefully this does not go through in California. But this is just another reason why you don't invest in California or a blue state. That stuff kind of happens. More than a third of the population lives in states that are partially reopened or will soon. This might be obsolete by now. I think the things to watch out for are Texas and Georgia are some of the front runners in this, and see how they react. I think most people who are kind of riding at the fear train are scared of that second wave. Will it happen? Will it won't? I mean, it probably will. But there's two kind of voices out there. One that says enough is enough. We need to get out there. We need to get the economy going, and of course the other one is we need to kind of protect human life. One of the best models I've seen of this is this kind of right here, that kind of predicting. We got to the peak. Now we're gonna see the second, third wave, and then how does the vaccine fall into all of this? I've been following a lot of the vaccine happenings at statnews.com, but everybody's thinking that it's either going to be later on this year, or some people are like, well, 3 years from now. It's been affecting the stock market every day, and that's why I don't invest in the stock market. It's so emotional. Whereas I think where we were tracking with collections in May and how we're already getting back to work, I think the impact is very little. I don't want to say that too soon because I don't feel like we're out of the woods, but that's why you invest in real estate, and especially cash flow for these situations like this. All different ways that people are kind of viewing this pandemic and how we're coming out. Is it going to be a Nike swish? Is it going to be a V? Is it the beginning of the end? Or, some people are even optimistic. One quick reminder that the, some of the older HIV/AIDS, SARS, MERS, Ebola, measles, Zika virus, um, you know, the 6 months after showed sometimes quite a big of a gain. After SARS, things bounced 14.5%. Stock market returns are going to go up and down. But I think, that's why you invest in real estate. This was a model that I made last month, which kind of showed, well, at what point does my real estate go down in value? Well, the first step here was the black swan event happened, which was the coronavirus, then fear set in. I would say this was probably in the beginning till March 15th. And then when the stay-at-home orders began, business income definitely decreased. Companies cut jobs, as I outlined early in April. But I don't think we got to a point where the tenants couldn't pay their rent. And again, I don't want to jinx things for myself, but based on where collections are, I'd say the bucks kind of stopped between this tenants can't pay rents, and we didn't really see market vacancies go up. So hopefully the trend doesn't continue, but there were a few other stopgaps to happen before our prices go down, which is decreased market rents, which impacts lower operating income, which means less income for properties, and then that impacts the macro market to be higher cap rates, which equates to lower property values. Again, this is why we invest in real estate. I think after all this is all said and done, people are going to be just dumbfounded how much was $2.3 trillion was spent to basically have people stay at home and just stop the economy. How are we going to pay for this? I don't know, but it's probably going to be higher taxes in the future, or finding some ways to get at the retirement funds of everybody. Investors are kind of cheering in their homes, because when you own rental properties, you own commodities, you own houses, and as inflation starts to happen to pay off all these debts, pretty much riding on the right side of the wave of this thing as your properties kind of go up as inflation starts to happen. To kind of wrap things up with the news, to take a page out of Edward de Bono's philosophy, the yellow hat, which is the optimistic hat to counteract all the fear mongering out there. And here's some of the good things that's been happening. Appreciation for stay-at-home spouses. I don't think people realize how much work that was to watch the kiddos. People getting outside and walking around and embracing physical fitness. I mean, I look outside in the evenings, it looks like Halloween out there with all the people walking around, although they're not wearing any costumes. Virtual learning being accepted. And I think in our corporate settings, less freaking meetings. Amen to that. We're actually getting things done, and we don't have to see each other face to face. People, I think what's nice is people are questioning the news and media. There's so much information out there, and people have their smartphones and their computers and trying to figure out, that nobody knows what's really the fact out there. There's some reports and some real life videos of hospitals not even being filled, and yet there's other things that are being reported. Number 5 here, appreciation for teachers who watch our kids. I think this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. So if you have a teacher, I would encourage you to get them something nice, even though there's not going to be that last day of school for them. Number 6, time with our smaller family units. And let's face it, if you're kind of listening to this economic report, you're probably in the upper half of the economic scale, and you may be doing the white collar quarantine. Nothing wrong with that. It's just I think we can all be fortunate that we are able to just call um, Grubhub and get takeout. And we have our jobs and we'll continue to bring in our salary and income. And at the end of the day, this was just a time where we just were closer to our immediate nuclear family. And another cool thing were the creation of virtual wine tastings and Zoom cocktail parties. We had a couple of these with our simple passive cash flow group and our mastermind recently. A lot of fun, and it's a thing now. Virtual wine tastings. Check it out. More of some other trends: online shopping, more effective through Amazon and Visa, remote-based environments outsourced through IT, contactless transactions coming. I think you're going to see that a lot more, and more telemedicine for medical and veterinary clinics. So that kind of wraps up the monthly report. The next few slides are about me, what's going on with me personally, as I kind of make my way through this world. I'm always trying to find ways to grow, and this month what I put together was I completed my trade line course, which I've been working all of 2019 to guinea pig for you guys. So I made $10,000 putting authorized users onto my credit cards and in my spare time. And so I put a resource out there for you guys to check out, simplepassivecashflow.com/trade lines. There is also a company course along with that if you guys want to dig into it and actually do the hobby. Make up to 5 figures, I guess you could make 6 figures if you have enough credit cards. Next on my list is I'm trying to help out people getting started with this real estate thing, and I'm trying to work on the turnkey remote rental course. I already have a couple modules in my e-course at simplepassivecashflow.com/e-course, but I think the feedback I'm getting from a lot of people, and I appreciate the feedback from a lot of you guys, is that it's just a lot of stuff. So I'm trying to break them out into more individual, shorter courses for you guys. How I get contributed to this world this month? Well, we a lot of the K1s come back, and we gave our passive investors a lot of great losses on their taxes. Here's an example K1 from one of our investors who put in $100,000. They got back $98,000 of passive losses on line 2 there. Also, a way I tried to contribute to the community was I gave away my e-course access for the quarantine time, because I figure a lot of people are busy or not doing anything at home. They got a little more time on their hands. And look, these are interesting times, uncertain times, whatever you want to call it. And I just feel like people needed a break. So I just figured I'd give it away for free for the time being. It's normally $800. Hopefully, if you guys like it, you guys will pay for it, so we can try and find and use the money to improve the program for the next guy coming through. But for just the rest of this month, the coupon code is KOUA, KOUA. The access to that expires at the end of this month, however. Other ways that I got significance this month, my stocks did not go down 30% in value, so I felt very special about that. I didn't have stocks. I don't invest in that stuff. And it didn't go unemployed. There's always you always have to try and create uncertainty in your life. And there was a lot of uncertainty in my life. Staying at home, just watching. I watch a lot more news than normal. And there's always a little low level of anxiety that is my tenants going to pay rent. And as of today, with May looking okay, breathe a little bit easier. 1 month at a time. And I think we're kind of coming out of it, but I'm not going to jinx myself there. Some things I achieved certainty. So the lending market kind of froze up there in March, but we have our lenders locked up for our next project, and things are looking good there. So, it's always nice to have some certainty in your life that you can kind of move forward and kind of tackle the next project. Um, I think it's hard to find love and connection in our lives these days, but virtual cocktail parties was one way of doing it. Um, but soon we'll be able to get out there and hang out with each other once again. And some new articles and podcasts that I like to highlight. Again, the trade line article. Learn how to make. I made $10,000 in 2019, and I'll continue to do so. SimplePassiveCashflow.com/trade lines, and the CARES Act guide, SimplePassiveCashflow.com/COVID-19, to see how you can get some of your, whether it's the PPP, payroll protection, or the idle grants, or some of those. Some distractions I had to deal with is, being at home and kind of a lot of the world slowing down a little bit. I had no excuses not to get anything done, and there is time to do what I need to do. It's just all a matter of priorities. And this is why I encourage a lot of you guys to get a coach. My coach really helped me define what I needed to get done and what are the barriers. And ultimately, like I said earlier, like, my coach just effectively just calls me out on my BS and keeps me moving. And some people aren't willing to pay a little bit of money for that. I'm like, well, that's cool. But a lot of people in my peer group who do real estate and entrepreneurs will swear by their coach, which is kind of a glorified accountability partner. But some people believe one thing, some do the other. All I know is I want to be like one subset, and so I'm going to follow what they do. Some fun things I bought this month, we call them Doodads, because they don't put money in our pocket, but let's just acknowledge the fact that we're just blowing some cash on it. I bought the Echelon mirror. I actually haven't used it yet, but I got it working. I'll report next time on how it's been working. And I really like popcorn. So I found this thing on Amazon where it's like a 10-pack variety set. I didn't know there was 10 varieties of popcorn, but you can see which one you like the best. I like that mushroom one, that on the left side. But yeah, they give you like 10 bags of 10 different varieties of popcorn. Kind of cool. Some of the lessons learned I had this month was to pay consultants to navigate that PPP and idle grants and loans. This is something I don't really like to spend my time on. I have the COVID-19 guide that you guys can pick through and just see if it's appealing, but I'm kind of changing the way I do business, where I stop trying to be cheap, easy, and free, because normally I get hurt doing that. So I'm waiting back to see what I get from the PPP and the idle grants. And as a group, we have a book club. You can join that at simplepassivecashflow.com/lanehack. And the title that we are reading by Mark Manson is Everything is Effed. I thought it would be a cool book about, with everything uncertain in the world, that it's a book about hope. And I like Mark Manson. He's kind of got a more of a stoic viewpoint on the world. And it's a good book on philosophy. And again, if you guys are interested in joining the Passive Investor Accelerator Mastermind, we do a couple calls on Mondays every month. You get the e-course for free. We have probably about 50 plus members in there now, most of which are accredited. So if you guys are tired of kicking tires with the other people at the local area who don't have money, or the other trolls on the free online forums out there, and you want to actually build real relationships with real people who are sort of filtered and coming into this community, go to simplepassivecashflow.com/journey. We just got a membership coordinator to help facilitate some of the networking, because it's all about getting people to connect within our group and trying to extract the most value we can from each member. And to cap things off here was a little thing I found on Reddit. I guess at Costco, there was a little flyer in the lunchroom saying that the last day for complimentary food and drinks at the food court will be Friday, May 8th, which kind of is a sign of the times. Is like, we're getting back to swing of things. The pity party is over, and we're getting back to work. So again, a lot of this stuff here, consult your own legal professionals. This information is presented for informational purposes only. But unless we have any questions, we'll see you guys next month. Aloha.